Get your hands where I can see them. Now! The command shattered the quiet hum of Oakwood Café, followed by the metallic sound of a gun being drawn. Heads turned, coffee cups froze mid-air. At the center of it all stood General Lloyd Carter, his U.S. Army uniform immaculate, medals gleaming under the afternoon light, confusion spreading across his calm but wary face. He had just stepped in for a cup of black coffee after leaving Joint Base Lewis McChord, unaware that within minutes, his name would dominate every screen in America. Officer Derek Vance's hand trembled on the trigger. His eyes narrowed in hostility. "You think wearing that uniform makes you special? Let's see some ID before I charge you for impersonating a federal officer." The cafe fell silent. The air thickened with disbelief. A decorated three-star general, a man who had led troops through 6 combat tours, was being treated like a criminal in his own country. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment, wherever you're watching from, to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. This story is one you won't forget. At precisely 3:15 p.m. that Thursday, Lloyd Carter had been driving back from a classified briefing about border security operations. He'd been fighting his own battle in silence, PTSD from years of war, the kind that wakes a man at 2 a.m. with the echo of explosions still ringing in his head. But he managed it with discipline, breathing exercises, and prayer. He was proud, even hopeful. He'd promised his wife, Elena, he'd be home by dinner. He parked near Oakwood Café, removed his gloves, and stepped inside. No escort, no aides, just a soldier seeking a moment of peace. Officer Derek Vance, 36, sat near the counter, half-eaten donut in one hand, eyes fixed on his phone. He wasn't supposed to be there. His shift had ended an hour earlier, but he liked the attention his uniform drew. He noticed Carter immediately, his posture tightening with resentment. To Vance, that uniform wasn't a symbol of honor. It was a reminder of his own rejection. Years ago, he'd tried to enlist in the Army, only to be turned down after a failed cardiac exam. Since then, he'd carried that wound like a badge of bitterness, turning it into quiet hatred, especially toward successful black servicemen. Carter greeted the young barista politely and ordered his usual black, no sugar, he said with a faint smile. But as he waited, he noticed the officer's stare, cold, unblinking. The veteran's instincts flared. He'd seen that kind of look before, in Iraq, moments before chaos. Still, he kept calm, adjusting the silver star pinned to his chest, reminding himself that some battles weren't fought with rifles. Vance rose from his seat, hand brushing against his holster. "Hey, buddy," he said loudly, walking over. "Where'd you get that uniform?" The entire cafe went quiet. Carter blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone measured. "This uniform was issued to me 28 years ago, at Fort Benning." "Yeah?" Vance sneered. "Then let's see your ID. We've had reports of imposters around here." The customers exchanged uneasy looks. A young veteran sitting by the window, a gray-haired Navy man named Captain Elias Ford, froze, his heart sinking. He recognized that voice, that tone. He'd heard it decades earlier when officers like him were humiliated for the color of their skin. Carter slowly reached into his jacket for his military ID, his movements steady and deliberate. "Officer." "I'm General Lloyd Carter, U.S. Army. Hands up!" Vance barked, gun raised. The cafe erupted in gasps. The barista dropped the coffee pot, glass shattering. Elias Ford shot to his feet. "That's a real general. You fool!" he shouted. "I served under his command." But Vance didn't care. Years of resentment and poison from online extremist groups had hardened him. All he saw was a tall black man in uniform, a target that challenged his own inadequacy. Carter's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. He'd faced enemy fire in Baghdad, survived mortar strikes, and carried bleeding soldiers on his back. But this moment, here at home, cut deeper than any wound. He raised his hands, voice steady but heavy with disbelief. "Officer, I am complying. Please, lower your weapon before someone gets hurt. Turn around," Vance yelled. He slammed Carter against the wall, twisting his arms behind his back. The metals clinked against his chest, one of them snapping loose and falling to the floor. The cafe's customers started recording, phones raised high. Carter gritted his teeth, pain surging through his shoulder as the cuffs clicked tight. The room filled with murmurs. "That's General Carter, the man from the Pentagon News. What's happening?" Elias Ford stepped closer. "Phone recording. You're making a mistake," he said. "He's one of ours." But Vance pushed him back. "Stay out of this. Old man, I know who I'm dealing with. These fakes always have stories." He yanked the general's ID from his pocket but didn't bother to look. His ego was already in command. As Carter was dragged toward the exit, he glanced back at the crowd, ordinary people, shocked and silent. In that moment, he realized something haunting. After nearly 3 decades defending his country, he was still fighting for the right to be seen as an American. Outside, flashing lights filled the parking lot. Vance shoved him into the patrol car, his voice laced with venom. "You think you're above the law? General, let's see how your stripes hold up downtown, inside the cafe." Elias Ford's hands trembled as he uploaded the video. "Let the world see this," he whispered. Within minutes, the footage began to spread on the other side of town. Elena Carter's phone buzzed with notifications. She watched in horror as her husband's image appeared on every social feed, her strong, disciplined husband being treated like a criminal. Her voice broke as she called Colonel Lena Cruz at the Pentagon. "They've arrested him. They've arrested Lloyd." Back in the patrol car. Carter sat silently, cuffs digging into his wrists, the metallic taste of humiliation heavy on his tongue. His training kicked in. "Control your breathing, stay composed, analyze the threat." He counted every second, every turn, memorizing details like he would in enemy territory. But deep down, a storm was rising. Decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and silent endurance collided with one devastating truth. Sometimes, the battlefield isn't abroad. It's right here at home. As the patrol car pulled into Tacoma PD, a young officer at the gate recognized the name on the report and froze. Wait, General Lloyd Carter, the Pentagon advisor? But Vance waved him off, his arrogance blinding him to reason. Fake credentials. "The feds will thank me later." At 3:45 p.m., the first hashtag appeared, "Honor Our Heroes." By 4 p.m., protests began outside the station. Across the nation, veterans, soldiers, and civilians watched the footage, fury building like wildfire. And somewhere in the depths of his humiliation, Carter lifted his eyes to the gray sky and whispered, "If justice still lives in this country, it will find its way." That was the moment America changed. The ride to Tacoma Police Department felt longer than any battlefield convoy General Lloyd Carter had ever endured. The siren wailed. Lights flickered red and blue across his reflection on the window. And for the first time in his 30 years of service, the enemy wasn't across an ocean. It was sitting in the front seat, wearing the same flag on his sleeve. Officer Derek Vance drove with smug confidence, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping to a country tune humming through the static of the radio. "You military types think you're untouchable," he muttered. "Not today." "Hero." Carter didn't answer. His wrists ached from the cuffs. His breathing slowed deliberately. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. It was a survival technique his therapist taught him for PTSD triggers. He'd used it in the desert. When rockets whistled overhead, now he used it in a police car, less than 5 miles from home, when they reached the station. Vance yanked open the door. "Out," he ordered. Carter stepped out calmly, his dignity intact despite the burning humiliation under his skin. Several officers stopped what they were doing when they saw the medals glinting on his uniform. A young officer whispered. "Isn't that General Carter from the Joint Chiefs briefing last year?" But Vance shot him a glare that silenced the room. "Processing room 3. He barked. "Inside." The fluorescent lights buzzed cold and merciless. Carter sat at a steel table, hands still cuffed. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air. Chief Sophia Reyes entered, her dark hair tied tightly, expression unreadable. She had risen fast through the ranks, one of the youngest female chiefs in Washington, but beneath her stern demeanor was fear of controversy, fear of losing the fragile support of the police union that had buried dozens of misconduct complaints over the years. "Officer Vance," she began sharply. "What's the charge?" "Impersonating a military officer," Vance said confidently. "And resisting arrest." Reyes frowned. "Resisting?" "I saw no report of violence." Vance smirked. "Not yet, but he refused to comply. Could be a threat. You should have heard him talking about classified operations." Her eyes flicked to Carter. "General, do you have identification?" Carter's voice was deep, calm, disciplined. "Yes." "Ma'am, it's in my jacket. If you would allow an officer to retrieve it, you'll find my Department of Defense clearance and service record." But Vance interrupted, leaning forward. "Don't fall for it. These imposters get better every year. Check his phone, too. He was on a call about border defense. Could be a leak." That word, leak, was enough to make Reyes hesitate. She knew how easily one accusation could spiral into a media storm. And this man before her, though composed, carried the kind of presence that made her nervous, authority that came from real leadership, not just a badge. She nodded curtly. "We'll verify your credentials. General, if that's who you are." Carter exhaled slowly, his patience stretched thin but not broken. "Chief, I understand your duty, but I've spent nearly 3 decades defending this country. I expect the same due process any citizen deserves." As she left the room, Vance leaned in close, his voice dripping with malice. "You think that star on your shoulder makes you better than me? My father died in Iraq. You people got all the glory, while we got the grief." Carter turned his gaze toward him, calm but piercing. "Your father's death deserves honor, Officer Vance, but your hatred dishonors his memory." Vance's jaw clenched. "Save the speeches. The world's done giving free passes to men like you." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, alone again. Carter inhaled deeply, closing his eyes to fight off the memories rushing back, the sandstorms, the cries of wounded soldiers, the helicopter that never came back. His heart pounded, and the walls began to close in. PTSD, that old enemy, clawed at his chest. He pressed his palms to the table, counting breaths. "Control the present," he whispered to himself. "Breathe, soldier." Outside the room, Captain Elias Ford had already arrived at the station, escorted by his grandson who worked as a clerk. The old veteran's face was flushed with outrage. "You can't hold a 3-star general without cause," he shouted. "I've known Lloyd Carter for 20 years. He's the real deal." But the desk sergeant shook his head helplessly. "Orders from Chief Reyes. Sir, verification in progress." Meanwhile, across town, Elena Carter sat in her living room, the TV replaying the viral video. Her husband's face, calm but restrained, was everywhere. She gripped her phone, dialing Colonel Lena Cruz. "Lena, they've got him. I don't know how far this will go, but please get through to General Kane at the Pentagon." Alarms were already ringing. General Victor Kane, tall and commanding, stood before a massive screen showing Carter's arrest footage. His voice thundered through the Situation Room. "That man has access to classified border operations. Do you realize what this means? The local police just handcuffed a man with Level 1 clearance." Colonel Lena Cruz stepped forward, her tone sharp but steady. "Sir, we've confirmed the arrest. Officer Derek Vance, Tacoma PD. The video's viral. 2 million views in an hour." Kane slammed his hand on the table. "Get the FBI on this. Now. Back in Tacoma." Chief Reyes received the first of several urgent calls. One from the Pentagon, one from the state governor, and one from a trembling city attorney. Her chest tightened as she realized the magnitude of what had happened. She turned to Vance, who was lounging in her office chair, scrolling through his phone. "You'd better pray you're right about this," she warned. Vance gave a dismissive shrug. "You'll thank me when the truth comes out. He's hiding something. Chief, you'll see." But deep down, he knew he'd gone too far. He'd already begun erasing messages on his phone, old chats with extremist groups, hate forums, anti-military threads. He even plugged in a small USB stick, copying data from the department's internal logs. If the Pentagon came knocking, he'd need leverage. Inside the interrogation room, Carter sat motionless. His eyes fell on his broken medal, still lying in the corner where it had snapped off earlier. Something in him hardened. Not anger, but clarity. He realized this moment wasn't just about him. It was about every soldier, every veteran who'd come home only to be treated as a stranger. When Chief Reyes returned, her tone had changed. "General Carter," she said carefully, "we're verifying your records now. It may take a little while." "Chief," Carter replied, "you have the power to do the right thing right now, or you can wait for the country to see your decision." As if on cue, a protest began forming outside, through the glass. The faint chants echoed, "Justice for Carter! Honor our heroes!" The video had spread like wildfire. News trucks pulled up, reporters spilling onto the street. At 4:20 p.m., the Pentagon confirmed his identity. A call came through the station line. "This is Colonel Lena Cruz from the Department of Defense. Release General Carter immediately." But when Reyes turned to Vance, she froze. He was gone. His desk was empty, his computer still running, and on the screen, files were downloading fast. Somewhere on the highway, Derek Vance's cruiser sped into the distance, blue lights flashing as if mocking the chaos he'd left behind. Inside, a USB drive blinked faintly on the dashboard, filled with secrets he wasn't supposed to have. Back at the station, Carter stood by the window, free but shaken. His eyes caught sight of the crowd outside, waving flags, shouting his name, but behind the noise, his heart was heavy. He'd spent his life fighting foreign enemies. Now, the war had come home, and this time, it was for the soul of his country. 45 minutes after General Lloyd Carter's arrest, the Pentagon Situation Room pulsed with red alerts across every screen. General Victor Kane stood at the head of the table, face carved in fury. "This is not a misunderstanding," he barked. "One of our own was handcuffed in full uniform, carrying classified data, and the video is everywhere." Around him, high-ranking officers and analysts shifted uneasily, watching the footage replay for the 100th time. Each frame, Carter's calm, the officer's rage, the cuffs clicking, was a wound to the nation's honor. Colonel Lena Cruz, hands steady but heart racing, briefed the room. "Sir, Officer Derek Vance of Tacoma PD initiated the arrest. The local chief, Sophia Reyes, has confirmed he acted independently, but the fallout." She paused as another notification flashed. "It's spreading. Sir, over 10 million views across platforms. #DAWR Honor Our Heroes is trending globally." General Kane's jaw tightened. He had mentored Carter for years, watched him rise from captain to general through sheer discipline and courage. The idea that this man, his protege, was sitting in a local jail, humiliated, broke something deep inside him. "Colonel Cruz," he said gravely, "I want every agency on this, FBI, DOJ, even Homeland if we have to. If one of my generals can be treated like this, what chance does a young sergeant have? Back in Tacoma." Chief Sophia Reyes stared through her office window as the first wave of protesters gathered outside the station. Signs read, "Justice for Carter and respect our soldiers." Their chants grew louder by the minute. She'd faced protests before, but this was different. This time, she wasn't sure the crowd was wrong. Inside, her officers scrolled through social feeds nervously. "Chief," one said. "Fox and CNN are outside. The governor's office just called." Reyes rubbed her temples, the weight of leadership pressing down like a mountain. She'd spent years trying to survive in a system that rewarded silence over integrity. Now that silence was suffocating her. Meanwhile, in a small command office 2 blocks away, FBI agent Rafael Moreno stepped out of his black SUV, his credentials flashing under the station lights. He was a man who had once worn the same uniform Carter wore, until one night, 5 years ago, Officer Derek Vance had pulled him over without cause. "Suspicious vehicle," Vance had said then, before searching his trunk and mocking his veteran ID. That memory burned fresh as Moreno entered the station. He wasn't here for vengeance, but justice. Finally, had a name and a face. "Where's Officer Vance?" he demanded. Chief Reyes looked up from her desk, startled. "You can't just walk in here. Federal order. Chief, the Pentagon authorized it. I'm taking over this case." Before she could respond, the radio crackled with chaos. "Unit 4 reporting. Protest turned violent at the North Barricade. Officer down. Tear gas deployed." The noise outside swelled. Shouts, screams, glass breaking. Reyes's face went pale. Dear God. In the interrogation room, Carter sat quietly, finally freed of his cuffs but still surrounded by distrust. A young officer brought him water, avoiding eye contact. "Sir, people are outside. They're chanting your name." Carter nodded slowly. "I don't want riots. I want truth." He sipped the water, his hands trembling slightly. Years of suppressing trauma were catching up with him. The sound of shouting from outside, the chaos of battle he thought he'd left behind, sent tremors through his chest, out on Pacific Avenue. Tear gas hung over the crowd. Captain Elias Ford, who had followed the police car from the café, was coughing through the haze, shouting to the protesters. "Stay calm." General Carter wouldn't want this, but no one listened. One young man threw a bottle that shattered against a police cruiser. In that moment, a flash bang exploded, lighting the street with smoke and panic. Reporters filmed every second. The footage of Carter's arrest had stirred anger. Now, the police response fueled a movement at the Pentagon. General Kane's voice thundered again. They used tear gas on veterans? On civilians protesting for a general? His fist slammed the table. "Enough! Agent Moreno, you have full authorization. Find Vance before this explodes nationwide." Moreno's phone buzzed. "A call from a local informant, sir," the voice whispered. "Vance is on the move. He just left the station in a patrol car. Lights on, heading southbound toward Route 7. Moreno grabbed his coat. "He's running," he muttered. Chief Reyes looked up, stunned. "Running? From what?" "From the truth," Moreno replied coldly. "Heading for the exit. Inside the command center. Lena Cruz pulled up intercepted data. Sir, she told General Kane. Vance accessed internal police servers before leaving. He downloaded digital case files, possibly linked to hate group communications. This isn't just racial bias anymore. It's infiltration." Kane froze, the implications sinking in. "You're saying we may have extremist penetration inside local law enforcement?" "Yes, sir," Cruz replied, "and Vance might not be working alone." Meanwhile, in the back corridors of the Tacoma station, Chief Reyes sat alone in her dim office, watching the crowd outside grow larger by the second. She'd tried to climb the ladder by staying quiet, by protecting her image, by turning a blind eye to complaints. Now that silence was coming for her. She reached for her phone, dialing the mayor. We need to release Carter. Now, she said firmly. And we need federal support. Outside. Reporters shouted into cameras. Breaking news. Tacoma PD under fire after tear gas used against protesters. The general's wife, Elena Carter, has just arrived. Elena stepped out of her car, face pale but eyes blazing. She raised a megaphone and spoke with the calm fury only a woman who's loved a soldier could muster. My husband served this nation for 28 years. He defended freedom overseas. Now we must defend it right here at home. Stand strong. Stand peaceful. But do not stay silent. The crowd erupted, chanting his name louder, inside. Carter's breathing grew heavy. The muffled sounds of the crowd, the flash of lights outside the frosted window, felt too familiar, too close to combat. His chest tightened, his vision blurred. The faces of fallen comrades flashed before him. He pressed his hands to the table, whispering through trembling lips. Stay calm. Soldier, this isn't Iraq. This isn't war. But his body didn't listen. The walls closed in. His hearing faded. When Agent Moreno finally arrived, he found Carter slumped against the table, sweating and pale. Get him medical attention, he ordered. The officers scrambled. As the medics rushed in, Moreno turned to Reyes. You still think this was routine procedure? She said nothing, eyes glistening with guilt. As Carter was lifted onto a stretcher, the crowd outside cheered at the sight of him alive, unaware of the storm still brewing. At that very same moment, 30 miles down the highway, Officer Derek Vance floored the gas pedal, sirens blaring, a USB drive glowing faintly on the seat beside him. His jaw was clenched, mind racing. They'll never take me down, he hissed, but in the mirror of his rear view, he saw a black SUV gaining fast, FBI lights flashing, inside the Pentagon. General Kane received the latest update. Carter had been freed but suffered a PTSD collapse. Protests were spreading across the country, and the FBI was now in pursuit of a rogue officer armed with sensitive data. Kane closed his eyes, voice low but resolute. Then it's begun. He said, We're not just fighting racism anymore. We're fighting for the soul of the uniform itself. And as the night descended over Tacoma, with streets burning and sirens wailing, America watched, realizing that the line between hero and suspect had never been thinner. The night air tore through Derek Vance's cruiser as he sped down Route 7, red and blue lights flashing like guilt he couldn't outrun. He gripped the wheel with one hand, the other clutching a small USB drive filled with digital evidence, records of racist chat rooms, extremist plans, and police cover-ups that could destroy him. They think they can pin this on me? He snarled to himself, sweat dripping down his temple. No. I'll go down my way. Behind him, a black SUV closed in, headlights cutting through the mist. Agent Rafael Moreno's voice echoed through the radio. Officer Vance, this is the FBI. Pull over now. But Vance didn't slow down. You again, he muttered, recognizing Moreno's voice from years ago. The same man he once humiliated during a traffic stop. You think you're better than me? Not tonight. He jerked the wheel sharply, tires screeching as the cruiser veered off the highway into the forest road. Back in Tacoma, General Lloyd Carter was lying on a stretcher in the police infirmary, his breathing steady but shallow. The paramedic's voice broke through the haze. BP stable, pulse returning to normal. Carter opened his eyes slowly, seeing fluorescent light above him blur into soft halos. His body was safe, but his mind still lingered in the desert, men screaming for help, sand turning red, the thunder of mortars. He gripped the edge of the gurney, grounding himself in the present. Where's my wife? He whispered. Elena appeared at his side, holding his hand with fierce tenderness. I'm here, she said softly. You're safe now. Lloyd, he closed his eyes, the sound of her voice anchoring him. Safe, he repeated, as if testing the word for truth. in the command room. Chief Sophia Reyes watched live drone footage relayed from the FBI. Her stomach twisted as she saw Vance's cruiser weaving through forest trails, sparks flying as branches scraped the roof. "He's not just running," she said quietly. "He's covering tracks." Moreno's voice came through the radio. "He knows what's on that drive. Chief, he's not going to jail. He's going to war, at the Pentagon." General Victor Kane stood before a wall of screens, each showing different angles. Carter recovering, protesters holding vigil, and the chase unfolding in real time. Colonel Lena Cruz briefed him rapidly. "Sir, our cyber unit decrypted partial data from Vance's hack. It includes communications with an extremist forum, members inside multiple departments, not just Tacoma PD." Kane's fists clenched. "How many?" "At least 12. Sir, all linked to rhetoric about cleansing the chain of command." Kane's voice dropped. Steel hard. "Then we have more than a scandal. We have a domestic threat." Back on Route 7, Moreno's SUV roared closer. "Vance, you're surrounded," he shouted through the loudspeaker. "You can't run from this. Pull over before it gets worse." Vance laughed bitterly, pushing the gas pedal to the floor. "You've already taken everything from me. Moreno, my career, my pride. Now you want my life?" He swerved onto a bridge, metal railing shaking as the cruiser fishtailed. Moreno followed, headlights slicing through fog. The two vehicles collided briefly, metal grinding against metal. The USB flew from Vance's hand, clattering across the seat. In that moment of distraction, his front tire burst, sending the cruiser spinning violently. The car smashed into the guardrail, flipped once, then landed in the shallow river below with a thunderous crash. Moreno stopped, leaped from his SUV, and sprinted down the embankment. "Get me rescue units!" he shouted into his radio. The wreckage hissed with steam, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. He waded through the water, yanking open the door. Vance was slumped against the steering wheel, blood trickling down his forehead, still conscious but trapped. "You should have stopped," Moreno said, panting. Vance coughed, his voice weak but defiant. "You don't get it. It's all bigger than me." Moreno grabbed his collar. "Then tell me who else is involved." Vance looked up, a bitter smile on his cracked lips. "You'll see soon enough. It's not just Tacoma." He passed out before he could finish. By dawn, the footage of the crash was everywhere. Reporters called it the chase of conscience. The public was divided, some calling Vance a villain, others insisting he'd been framed. But for Carter, none of it mattered. Lying in his hospital bed, he was finally awake, watching the news replay the chase that had nearly claimed another life. Elena sat beside him, her eyes glistening with pride and pain. "They're calling you a hero again," she said softly. He looked at her, weary but resolute. "Heroes bleed quietly. Elena, this country forgets that too easily." She touched his hand. "Then don't stay quiet anymore." At that moment, Colonel Lena Cruz entered the room, crisp uniform immaculate but face drawn from exhaustion. "General," she said respectfully, "we've decrypted the full contents of the drive. It's worse than we thought." She placed a folder on his table. Inside were documents, chat logs, internal memos, disciplinary reports, all linking Derek Vance to an underground network of officers and civilians promoting racial and ideological violence, among the names listed. Carter noticed one that made his blood run cold. Dr. Jamal Ellis. "I know this man," Carter said. "He was arrested 5 years ago. Wrongfully. His career destroyed." Cruz nodded. "Yes. Sir, one of Vance's early victims. He's agreed to testify." Hours later, a press conference unfolded outside the Pentagon. Cameras flashed as General Kane addressed the nation. "We are facing not just prejudice, but infiltration of extremism into the very systems meant to protect our people. But let me be clear, this ends now. Justice will not wear a badge of hate. His words rippled across the country, sparking both outrage and hope. Back in Tacoma, Chief Reyes finally stepped before the press, her voice shaking but honest. I failed my duty as a leader. I turned a blind eye to misconduct to protect my position. That ends today. Officer Vance acted alone, but my silence enabled him. I resign, effective immediately. Reporters gasped, cameras clicking, for the first time in years. She felt free. Meanwhile, in a quiet hospital room, Carter faced Dr. Jamal Ellis, the man whose life had been ruined by the same officer who'd humiliated him. Ellis, now graying and solemn, looked at the general with weary respect. They called me a liar. Sir, said I attacked him. I lost my license, my family, everything. Carter nodded, eyes heavy with empathy. Then we'll make them listen this time. News of the confession spread quickly. Across the nation, protests turned from anger to unity. Veterans and civilians marched side by side, carrying signs that read, "Justice for all in uniform and no more Vances in power." Social media lit up with new messages of hope. The tag, "Dirk honor our heroes," now symbolizing more than outrage. It became a movement that night, as Carter stood by the hospital window overlooking the city. The lights below flickered like tiny embers of change. He turned to Elena and whispered, "I spent my life fighting enemies I could see. Now, I finally understand. The hardest battle is for the truth. Outside." The news anchor's voice echoed across televisions nationwide. Officer Derek Vance is in federal custody, charged with obstruction, hacking, and hate crimes. The Pentagon confirms the formation of a national task force against extremist infiltration. General Carter remains hospitalized but stable. His statement to the press is expected tomorrow morning. And as dawn broke over Tacoma, with fog lifting from the river where justice nearly drowned, one thing was clear. This was no longer about one man's humiliation. It was about America's reckoning with its conscience. Rain fell softly over Tacoma that morning, washing away the smoke from the night's protests, but not the stain the city now carried. Inside the federal field office, Agent Rafael Moreno spread photographs, documents, and digital logs across the table. Each page told a piece of a nightmare. Derek Vance's hate-fueled trail, buried inside encrypted files. He wasn't just a bad cop, Moreno said quietly, his voice low and controlled. He was part of a movement. Across from him, Colonel Lena Cruz nodded grimly. A movement with members who swore to protect this nation. She replied, "That's what makes it so dangerous." She turned to the screen showing the recovered chat messages, Patriots for Purity, the Order of Seven, threads filled with talk about cleansing the ranks and exposing weak leadership. Moreno's jaw tightened, and their first target was Carter. Meanwhile, in his hospital room, General Lloyd Carter sat upright, dressed in a clean set of fatigues. The nurses had insisted he rest, but sleep was impossible. His body had healed, yet his mind was a battlefield of ghosts. Elena sat beside him, reading updates from the news. "They're calling it the largest internal security breach since the early 2000s, she said. "People are demanding a national review of police-military relations." Carter's eyes were fixed on the muted television, his own face frozen on the screen behind the headline, "General Carter Breaks Silence." He sighed deeply. "I never wanted to be a symbol," he said quietly. "I just wanted peace." Elena touched his hand. "Sometimes peace starts with a fight. Lloyd, maybe this one's yours." Later that day, Chief Sofia Reyes walked into the federal conference room where Moreno and Cruz were reviewing the case. Her uniform was gone. She wore plain clothes now, the weight of resignation visible in her eyes. "I came to tell the truth," she said simply. "I covered up complaints. Vance had 3 prior misconduct reports. 2 for racial harassment, 1 for unlawful search. I dismissed them all. I told myself it was politics, but the truth is, I was afraid. Moreno looked up from his files. Afraid of what? She met his eyes. Afraid of being replaced. A Hispanic woman in charge of a mostly white department. I thought if I punished one of them, they'd turn on me. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I see now that fear cost me my integrity. Cruz nodded slowly. Then help us fix what's left. Testify before Congress when this goes federal. Reyes hesitated, then exhaled. I will. Across the city. Protesters filled downtown streets again, but this time, the anger was mixed with unity. Veterans marched alongside civilians, holding candles and flags. Signs read, "Protect those who protect us and justice for General Carter." At the center of it all stood Dr. Jamal Ellis, the once disgraced physician whose name had appeared in Vance's files. He held a microphone, his voice raw with emotion. 5 years ago, I was handcuffed like a criminal for doing my job. He said, I lost everything because one officer's prejudice outweighed my humanity. But today, because of General Carter, the truth is finally being heard. This isn't just his fight, it's ours. The crowd roared in approval. Inside the federal lab, Moreno's team worked tirelessly decrypting Vance's files. One folder contained videos, body cam footage, edited and hidden. In one of them, Vance was seen planting evidence during an old arrest. In another, he was part of a small meeting inside a private warehouse with men wearing tactical vests and patches bearing the same insignia, a coiled snake wrapped around a flag with the number 7. Moreno paused the video. The Order of 7, he murmured. It's not just talk. They're organized. Cruz leaned closer. We need names. Rafael, fast, by evening. The tension reached the highest levels of government. General Kane convened another Pentagon briefing, this time joined by Justice Department officials and the FBI director. We've confirmed extremist infiltration across multiple precincts. Kane announced. Tacoma is just the start. Their communications mentioned targets in Atlanta, Dallas, and Chicago. The room fell silent. A DOJ official spoke, voice wary. If this goes public, we could face mass panic. Military confidence is already shaken. Kane slammed a hand on the table. Then we face it. No more silence. We fight this like any other enemy. Head on. Back in Tacoma. Carter was discharged from the hospital. The air outside felt different. Heavier, but free. Reporters swarmed as he exited. Microphones raised. General Carter. What do you plan to do next? One shouted. He stopped for a moment, looking into the cameras. I plan to do what I've always done, he said. Protect my country. But this time, from within. His words spread across every network that night. As the investigation deepened, threats began to surface. Elena Carter started receiving anonymous messages online, slurs, warnings, and one chilling line that read, "You should have stayed silent like the rest." Carter's security detail increased. Moreno traced the IP addresses and found links to the same extremist chat rooms. They're trying to intimidate you, he told Carter. That means we're close. Later that night, Carter visited the Tacoma War Memorial, standing alone beneath the rain. He placed his broken Silver Star medal, snapped during the arrest, on the stone base. Every fight has a cost, he whispered. If mine can heal this country, then let it cost me everything. Meanwhile, Vance sat in a federal holding cell, hands shackled, eyes hollow. The once arrogant officer was now a broken man awaiting charges under the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. When Moreno entered the interrogation room, Vance chuckled weakly. You think locking me up fixes anything? There are more of us than you think. Moreno leaned forward, his tone calm but lethal. And every one of you will answer for what you've done. By the next morning, the official charges were announced. 38 federal counts, including obstruction of justice, unauthorized access to classified systems, and hate crimes. Vance would face trial in Seattle under federal jurisdiction. Chief Reyes's resignation and testimony drew national praise, and Dr. Ellis's story went viral, symbolizing how one man's injustice could ignite a movement. In Washington, lawmakers proposed the Service Integrity Act, a sweeping reform bill mandating background screenings, bias training, and military civilian oversight boards. The momentum was unstoppable. Across the country, police departments began reviewing their policies. Veteran organizations joined the call for reform, and the name Lloyd Carter became synonymous with moral courage. That evening, Elena found her husband on the porch, staring out into the night. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, we're just beginning. Change doesn't come from one man. It comes from everyone brave enough to face their reflection." She smiled faintly. "Then let them see yours." And as the lights of Tacoma shimmered across the horizon, the rain finally stopped, as if the heavens themselves had paused to listen, to the story of a man who refused to bow, and a nation that was just beginning to remember what honor truly meant. The federal courthouse in Seattle stood like a fortress that morning, gray, solemn, and humming with tension. Crowds filled the steps, waving flags and holding signs that read, "Justice for Carter and Truth Has No Rank," inside. The air was heavy with the anticipation of history in the making. Officer Derek Vance, pale and unshaven, sat at the defense table, wrists shackled, eyes darting nervously across the room. The man who once strutted with arrogance now looked small under the weight of his own choices. Across the aisle sat General Lloyd Carter, dignified in his pressed uniform, his medals restored and polished, though one, the silver star he'd broken during his arrest, remained cracked by choice. He wanted that imperfection visible. It was a reminder of what prejudice can shatter. Beside him sat Elena, her calm strength an anchor against the chaos of the day. Judge Alicia Grant entered the courtroom promptly at 9. The room rose. Her reputation preceded her, tough, fair, and unflinching in the face of corruption. Years ago, she had survived her own violent encounter with police. Now, she was the embodiment of accountability. Her voice carried across the chamber, clear and deliberate. "This court will uphold order, truth, and justice, without bias or favor." Every camera clicked at once. The world was watching. Prosecutor Nathan Kim opened with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is not about a single bad decision or an isolated mistake. It's about power, prejudice, and betrayal of duty. Derek Vance, a sworn officer, targeted a decorated general based solely on the color of his skin and the uniform he wore. He then attempted to cover his crimes through hacking, obstruction, and deception. The evidence will show he acted not out of fear, but hatred. The defense attorney, a middle-aged man with graying hair, rose. "My client admits to misconduct," he said cautiously, but he was under immense stress. He believed he was protecting national security. The situation escalated due to confusion, not racism. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judge Grant's eyes narrowed. "Confusion doesn't justify criminal misconduct. Counselor, stick to facts." The prosecution called its first witness, Agent Rafael Moreno. He took the stand, composed and resolute. "Agent Moreno," the prosecutor began, "describe your encounter with the defendant on the night of the arrest." Moreno's voice was steady. "We pursued Officer Vance after he fled Tacoma PD. He attempted to destroy evidence linking him to extremist networks. When apprehended, he confessed partial involvement and referenced others still within law enforcement." The prosecutor handed him a stack of documents. "Are these the communications retrieved from Vance's encrypted drive?" Moreno nodded. "Yes, sir." They include group messages and emails celebrating acts of discrimination, calling them small purges. The defendant participated in all of them. Vance shifted uneasily in his seat, muttering something under his breath. Judge Grant's gavel struck once. Defendant will remain silent unless spoken to. The courtroom stilled. Next came Dr. Jamal Ellis. His voice quivered at first, but courage strengthened it. I was arrested by Officer Vance 5 years ago for disorderly conduct. In reality, for questioning his treatment of a black teenager in my clinic. I lost my medical license, my home, and my marriage. No charges ever stuck. He ruined my life. The defense objected, but Judge Grant waved it off. Overruled. The testimony speaks to motive. Ellis turned toward Vance. You said I'd never wear my coat again. You were right. For 5 years. But today, I'm wearing it in court as a witness to the truth. The gallery erupted in soft applause until the judge restored order. Then came Chief Sophia Reyes. She walked to the stand in plain clothes, her posture rigid with guilt. I failed, she said bluntly. I allowed Officer Vance to remain on duty despite multiple complaints. I silenced victims to protect the department's image. I was wrong, the prosecutor asked. Why tell the truth now? She glanced at Carter in the audience. Because silence nearly destroyed an innocent man, and almost this city. I won't let it destroy my soul. Her confession drew gasps from the crowd, even from reporters who had once defended her leadership when General Carter was called to testify. The entire courtroom rose instinctively, not from command, but respect. He stood tall, shoulders square, eyes calm. General. The prosecutor began softly. Can you describe the events of October 12th? Carter nodded. I walked into Oakwood Café to buy coffee after a briefing at Joint Base Lewis McChord. I was in uniform, carrying classified documents. Officer Vance accused me of impersonating an officer. When I tried to identify myself, he drew his weapon. The prosecutor stepped closer. What went through your mind in that moment? Carter paused, choosing his words carefully. I've faced enemies overseas. I've been shot at, bombed, nearly buried alive. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own country saw me as the threat. The courtroom fell silent. His voice deepened. Racism isn't just an insult. It's a betrayal. A betrayal of everything that flag represents. The defense tried to shake him. General, you're an influential man. Isn't it possible you're using this incident to advance your own cause? Carter's gaze was unflinching. The only cause I serve is justice. Counselor. And if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's what justice is supposed to do. Even Judge Grant allowed a faint nod of approval. Finally. The prosecution played a recording recovered from Vance's drive, an audio file where he bragged to fellow officers. That general thought he could walk in like he owned the place. Not in my town, not on my watch. The room erupted in shock. The jury's expressions hardened. The defense slumped in defeat. In his closing statement, Prosecutor Kim's voice carried a quiet force. Derek Vance used the authority granted to him by the people to humiliate, harm, and endanger one of this nation's finest soldiers. This wasn't confusion. It was corruption. And corruption must be confronted. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged veteran named Susan Hale, stood with the verdict slip in her trembling hand. On all 38 counts, we find the defendant, Derek Vance, guilty. The words rang like a gunshot. Vance lowered his head, muttering curses under his breath. His attorney tried to calm him, but he slammed his fists against the table, shouting, "You'll regret this! He's no hero! He's a fraud!" Judge Grant's gavel struck thunderously. "Enough! Officer Vance, you will show respect in my court or be removed." Vance froze, chest heaving, eyes burning with hate. Judge Grant's voice softened, almost mournful. I once believed the system could correct itself. But it takes men like General Carter, and sometimes trials like this, to remind us what justice truly means. She turned to the jury, then to the nation watching live. Let this verdict mark not vengeance, but restoration. No man, regardless of rank or color, is above or beneath the law. That is the promise of this court. Carter closed his eyes, a single tear escaping, quiet, restrained, but heavy with years of endurance. Elena reached for his hand. The audience rose to their feet, not in triumph, but reverence. Outside, bells rang from nearby churches as the news broke across every screen. Officer Derek Vance convicted in historic federal trial. And though the battle was not yet over, for the first time in years, America seemed to breathe again, aware that truth, no matter how long it takes, still finds its way to the light. 3 months later, on a bright spring morning, the federal courthouse in Seattle was silent except for the murmur of footsteps as people filled the gallery once more. Today was sentencing. The flags behind the judge's bench stood tall, sunlight glinting through the high windows like a quiet symbol of renewal. Derek Vance, thinner now, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, sat motionless as marshals led him in. His arrogance had faded into something hollow, fear mixed with disbelief, across the room. General Lloyd Carter sat beside his wife, Elena, calm and composed in his uniform, the crack in his silver star still visible against his chest. There was no anger in his face, only the solemn dignity of a man who had seen too much pain to waste time on hate. Judge Alicia Grant entered promptly at 9. The room rose, then sat again in unison. Her voice carried steady authority. We are here to deliver sentencing in United States versus Derek Vance. This case has stirred the conscience of our nation. It has forced us to confront what happens when those sworn to protect turn that power into prejudice. She paused, looking directly at Vance. Mr. Vance, do you have anything to say before this court passes judgment? For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, voice cracked and eyes downcast, he whispered, I thought I was doing my job. I thought I was defending my city. But maybe I just wanted someone to blame. He turned slightly toward Carter. I was wrong. I can't undo what I did. His voice broke. I'm sorry. The courtroom was silent. Even those who despised him felt the faint tremor of sincerity. But Judge Grant's expression didn't soften. Your apology comes late, but perhaps not too late for your own soul. This court sentences you to 40 years in federal prison for obstruction, hate crimes, and conspiracy. You will serve your time in a federal facility under the Department of Justice's supervision. Let this be a message. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The gavel struck once, echoing like the final note of a long, painful symphony. As marshals escorted Vance away, his shoulders slumped. A man crushed beneath the weight of his own prejudice. Outside, reporters filled the courthouse steps, capturing history in headlines before the ink was even dry. Vance sentenced to 40 years, justice at last. But for Carter, it wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoration. He turned to Elena and whispered, Let this be the end of division and the beginning of duty. That afternoon, Carter met with General Victor Kane and Colonel Lena Cruz at the Pentagon. The mood was solemn but hopeful. Congress passed the Military Service Protection Act this morning. Cruz reported, It's already being called Carter's Law. It mandates federal oversight for incidents involving service members in civilian jurisdictions, and it funds joint police-military bias training across all 50 states. Kane smiled proudly. You've changed the country. Lloyd. Carter shook his head. We did this together. Every soldier. Every veteran who refused to be silent. The system only works when good people stop pretending it's not broken. Meanwhile, Chief Sophia Reyes, now retired, testified before a congressional hearing on policing reforms, her voice firm and unapologetic. "We need courage at every level," she said. "I was silent once. I will not be silent again." Dr. Jamal Ellis, reinstated to his medical practice, launched a nonprofit clinic for veterans and victims of wrongful arrests, naming it the Honor Project in tribute to Carter and Elena Carter, who had become the face of peaceful reform, organized the Unity March for Justice, gathering hundreds of thousands across Washington, D.C., Tacoma, and Chicago, calling for fairness, accountability, and empathy in Tacoma. The police department was disbanded and rebuilt under new leadership. Officers now trained alongside veterans, learning from the very people once marginalized by their own prejudice. Murals of Carter appeared across the city, some painted by children, others by veterans. Below each one was a single phrase: "Prejudice is fatal. Justice endures." Months later, Carter returned to Joint Base Lewis McChord, where the U.S. Army held a ceremony in his honor. Soldiers stood at attention as he took the stage, his voice steady, his presence commanding. "I've fought many battles," he began, "but none harder than the one for dignity. The fight for justice doesn't end on the battlefield. It begins in the heart. I stand here today not as a victim, but as proof that truth can still prevail." Applause filled the hall, not thunderous, but sincere, the kind that comes from respect earned through quiet strength. After the ceremony, Carter walked to the memorial garden behind the base. Captain Elias Ford, the veteran who had filmed the arrest that started it all, stood waiting. The two men shook hands firmly. "You saved me that day, Captain," Carter said. Ford smiled. "No, General, you saved all of us," as the sun set over Tacoma. Carter placed his cracked silver star at the base of the memorial stone, beside the names of fallen soldiers. "We all fight our wars," he said softly, "some on foreign soil, some right here at home. But what matters is how we fight them, with honor, with courage, and with compassion." The camera crews that once swarmed him were gone. The protests had quieted. The noise had faded into something purer, respect. And in that silence, Carter felt peace for the first time in years. Elena joined him, slipping her hand into his. Together, they looked toward the horizon, the city glimmering with renewed hope. Across the nation, classrooms studied his case, documentaries told his story, and departments adopted his reforms. Young recruits recited his words during training: "Prejudice is fatal, but justice endures." And as the years passed, his name became more than a headline. It became a promise, a reminder that even when injustice strikes at the highest ranks, integrity can still rise higher. That day, as the flag above JBLM swayed gently in the breeze, the wind carried his quiet prayer over the fields he once commanded. May we never again confuse authority with righteousness, and may this nation finally learn to see every man by his heart, not his color. It was not just the end of a story. It was the beginning of America's awakening. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe, give it a like, and share it with someone who believes in justice and dignity. And always remember, prejudice is fatal, but justice endures.